How good is Sunday night with the wonderful Linda Scott and the wonderful James Ashby, who, of course, does not want anyone to know about your poon. But it is an amazing place. It is a magnificent spot where he is. All right. Let's just talk about some of the reactions to the firebomb stuff. I won't do too much on it because I know you've heard an awful lot in the past little while. Linda, do you think that there is a delayed response, a slightly off response, because there are members of that community that are saying there is, all right? So we sort of can't say that down is up and up is down. But is the PM meeting your standard for how to react to this?
Look, I don't think this is about how people respond. It's about the fact that there was a horrific crime committed, and
Correct.
that was at a synagogue, a place of worship and a very special place for all Australians, but particularly for those of Jewish faith or background. And that's just a devastating thing to happen at any time in any place in the world. But to have it, Paul, here happen in Australia, in Victoria, is just truly horrific. I mean, we've talked before. I moved when formerly I was on the City of Sydney to try and get hate speech, racist graffiti removed from the City of Sydney streets within an hour or two. Lord Mayor Clover Moore rejected that. I think there is more that we can all be doing, but what I don't think we should do is make this a partisan issue. I don't think we want to see our leaders divided. Australians don't want to see Australian political leaders divided over these kinds of issues. I think we can all universally condemn hate. We can all, of course, universally condemn this crime.
So, James, I'm sure you will agree with part and disagree with much, but there was one thing I wanted to ask you about, which was Chris Minns. So Chris Minns would like in New South Wales there to be basically, I'm going to get this wrong to some degree, but it is where we are. There are rules around what you can and can't do out the front of an abortion clinic, and there are certain punishments that come with trying to stop people accessing protesting. And something like that legislation is being discussed as being able to move around to significant religious sites. How would you feel about that as the response here?
Well, look, it's a start, and I commend Chris Minns for at least having the gumption to come up with a better solution than our Prime Minister has come up with to this point. But the problem remains that we are seeing these protests end up in some iconic landmark locations across our country. It doesn't matter whether it's the Opera House in Sydney or some of the more iconic places across other cities in this country. But I think what Labor have forgotten here is that 1,200 people were massacred last October on the 7th, 1,200 dead, a further 254 abducted and held as hostages. There's still over 100 unaccounted for. We presume some of them are still alive, but there's no guarantees. And the issue that we have here, the Labor government very slow to come out when this terrorism attack occurred at the get-go. You did not see Jewish people protesting, rioting or conducting themselves in any form of inappropriate manner. There weren't firebombs or threats on mosques. They behaved themselves because they knew that the country of origin where this terrorism attack took place, there would be swift action, and that action took place. The issue that we've allowed here in this country is we have not taken a firm position as a nation on who we back here. Israel were the country that were attacked first, and they've defended the rights of their country to look after their own people. And yes, blood has been spilt on both sides, but it was deserved retaliation. And I stand with Israel on that fact. No one can ever take away the action that country performed. I don't want to see what's happening in this country go any further. I don't want to see, if we're seeing the problems we are now with a certain religious group, obviously we don't know who attacked this mosque, but we do know there is a particular religious group that have been protesting the most. I don't want to end up like England, where the number one name in that country is Muhammad today. I want to remain a country that is not divided on racial or religious grounds. And that is the path we're heading down, unfortunately, in this country right now.
I can add a new poll to the one that I got into great detail during the start of the program, and it is the news poll. At this stage, I can't see what the overalls are about two-party preferred, all the rest of it here. Again, terrible result for the Prime Minister. For strong and decisive leader, It's Dutton 60 to Albanese's 44, and that apparently is the lowest score that a Prime Minister has ever got in that category since they started asking it. In about half a dozen different categories. Again, unsurprisingly, he's down, and these are all just versions of the same message about where people are right now. James, again, obviously, One Nation sitting at that 7% national mark means in other places it's way higher, in some places it's way lower. It means, of course, the Senate picture, all of those things, and also it means preferences. But we're now getting to the stage where last year was so bad a reset was needed at the start of this year. This year is worse than last year in terms of the ending, and the reset is an election.
Yeah, Peter Dutton's got a lot of ground to make up, and while he tends to have these bursts where he does well, it's not consistent enough so close to an election, and I really want to see more out of Peter Dutton. I want to see an assertive bloke who I know he is, I know he's capable of it, but we could be weeks or months out from an election at the rate we're going. There's words to say that we are, there could be an announcement as early as Australia Day that we're going to an early election. The problem is the coalition have only got 55 seats in the lower house. Correct. They've got to get at least 76 to govern. There's a hell of a long way to go. And Labor are very good tactically on the ground. And they've also made it very, very comfortable for themselves in the lower house with the Teals and the Greens and some of those other crossbench members. Look at the relationship with Bob Katter and Anthony Albanese. Yep. You just never quite know where people like Bob will go, and certainly the Teals. I don't know. Teal is a form of green. It's just a lighter shade of green. And no, you've just got to have a look at their voting pattern. Peter Dutton has got to make a very, very decisive appeal to the Australian public. One Nation have made it very clear. We're going to put Labor and the Greens last. We did it in the state, and look what the result gave the coalition here in Queensland, gave them majority government in their own right. We'll do the same thing in the federal sphere. All we ask the Australian people to do is vote for us, definitely in the lower house, but also in the Senate, because we can rebalance things in the Senate. That's the tough part, because at the present moment, the Greens have got the balance of power, and I'd hate to see the coalition win government, but then still have to negotiate with the Greens in the Senate to get anything passed. That'd be chaotic.
Linda, I'm just having a look here at the pendulum from the last election. There are 10 seats that are 4% or under, okay? So this is your marginal game. But, as James just said, if you're going from 55 to 76, you need a lot more than that, which of course means the hill gets higher and higher. Is that the assumption amongst Labor people, that it is just that the hill is just, I get it, the numbers are terrible, the polls are awful, this is the bad news this and bad news that, and, Paul seems very excited at night, for the hate watchers. But is for Labor people, is the assumption that the hill is just too high and can't be climbed by an opposition?
No, I don't think Labor or the Prime Minister take anything for granted. They know that this election will be challenging, and that the central question that Australians will be asking themselves is who will be the best leader to take me forward, to help with my cost of living pressures, to help make good policy decisions about the future of Australia. And we know that the Coalition have put out a range of policies, nuclear energy, but not really off the ground until 2050. How will that relieve people's cost of living? How will Peter Dutton and the Coalition make a difference to people's price pressures? We don't have any of those answers yet, whether, of course, Labor's put so many policies on record: cheaper childcare, cheaper medicines, tax breaks, so many things that Labor have done to help ease people's cost of living pressures, Paul. So really this is going to be an election about, who do you trust to support you, to help you with your household budget? And Australians are going to have to really focus hard on that question.
Because I love you, I will not hammer home the point, but go back to the start of the show, everyone. 59%. Do you agree with, does Labor have your back? There's a lot there, potentially, for a lot of people to work with. I want to talk about Advance Australia, who we know talked a big game, but didn't really sort of land the punch in the Dunkley by-election. They, of course, were a little quieter, but had a big game when it came to The Voice, got a major result, and they've decided to absolutely go the Greens. This is part of a campaign that is up. It's up on their website if you want to go and have a look at it. But more importantly, I saw an ad for this on television as a pre-roll on one of the on-demand services earlier today. So it is not just the internet, it is now breaking out of that, and this is their attack on the Greens.
The Greens Party is a party of hatred of Western civilisation, which wants to destroy every tradition we've been built on.
The Greens are refusing to condemn the vandalism of Canberra's war memorials.
Protesting, painting is a form of speech.
So, Linda, I'm intrigued here about what they're trying to do here, right? Because obviously the Teals are the ones who are standing in the way of the... And everyone has a right to do whatever. These are not Liberal-owned seats. I'm not one of those people. But mathematically, the Greens are not the problem for the right of politics getting where they want to go. So why is Advance going specifically in on the Greens rather than Labor, who is the main target?
Well, look, I don't know what Advance are doing. They're not a group I tend to
not
know
on the CC?
or associate
You're not in the
myself
Signal
with,
chat?
as you can imagine. But look, I mean, I think it is correct to say that the Greens are a threat to the coalition. And I, again, raised on this show last weekend the idea that Peter Dutton is going to have to answer to many Liberal voters who will want to understand why he was opposing the government's creation of an environmental protection agency, why he was standing in the way of more protection for nature, why he's opposing renewable energy projects. These are going to be increasingly difficult for Peter Dutton to answer.
It's a Christmas week, I can't argue with. There's answers for all of those.
Right? So I don't think it's correct to say that the Greens are not a threat just to... they're a threat to both sides.
Well, I was double-checking. The Greens
both of
actually
the
did
major
win the
parties.
seat of Brisbane off
Yeah,
the Libs, so they didn't even sort of go via.
right.
There was a straight change.
Yeah.